I was like, am I going to be the only one on camera? Which is fine.
Hello. No,
Hello.
it's okay. I was waiting for the rest of you. This is the quietest I've ever heard
Yeah,
this
yeah,
group
no.
before the meeting.
I actually I remembered that I was going to facilitate, but then I forgot that I needed to have like the land acknowledgement and everything, so I was running around trying to get that. Anyway, all right.
Gotcha.
Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show us that we are committed to show that we are committed to treating all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erase It is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and to not argue, and not to argue. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States, yeah, this is the correct one, I think, is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Tonkawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Coilla and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are still on Indigenous land, and it will always be Indigenous land. Okay, just briefly to reiterate the format of the meeting. Everybody should please keep themselves on mute if you're not speaking. I'll be keeping a list of everybody who would like to speak, and when you get to speak, you get 2 minutes to speak. If you would like to speak, please hold up one finger to indicate that you would like to be on the list. Respect the speaker, no side comments to others, no personal attacks or name calling. If you do have a clarifying question, once the speaker is finished, you can raise 2 fingers and you can go out of order to ask the clarifying question, but not give your opinion. The questions are meant to not to further the opinions of the asker. They don't require a long monologue, and anything that's not clarifying will be disallowed, and that person can just go on the list. So I'll introduce, I guess, the reason why I brought the topic. Oh, first, let's go around to folks who wish to introduce themselves. Teresa, go ahead.
Well, I'm never first. Yay. I'm Teresa in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been coming since August 2022.
Great, thanks. And I forgot to say, I'm Marla. I've been coming to Erace since about 2020. I'm in the New Orleans area. And Louise?
Hi, I'm Louise. I've been attending Erace meetings for over 2 decades, firstly in New Orleans and now in Austin. And Marla, do you want me to get the timer thing for you?
That would be great. Thank you. That way I don't have to interrupt people. So thank you. All right, Larry.
Yes, good morning. I'm Larry. I started with the race 1995, about 30 years ago. Good to be here and good morning to everybody.
Good morning. And then Marion, if she can hear us. Okay, we'll wait for Marion just in case. I think Phyllis is abstaining today, so we can move on. I can tell you why I chose this article. The reason why I chose it is lately I've been following more folks on social media, Instagram specifically, several dietitians that I have really come to respect because they deal specifically with this topic, and also other intersectionalities when it comes to food and weight and all of those things. I have also noticed I've been dealing with my own internalized anti-fatness just with myself. Like, for example, going to the doctor's office, I have now specifically started just telling them I'm not going to be weighed simply because of what that creates in my head. And quite honestly, they don't need it. You know, yes, there are weight-based medications, but the reality is there are very few. And if they really need that, they can reference my last weight. So it just protects myself psychologically. And also it hopefully keeps weight from being a primary topic of conversation when I actually am in an appointment. I just continue also to see more people attaching morality to food, which is very, very bothersome, and suggesting that, you know, whole foods are superior to processed foods and so forth, when in reality, most everything we eat is processed. So all these things go hand in hand. And I just thought it was a great article, a great outline of a way to sort of introduce the topic. So with that, I will take folks who would like to be on the list and we can get started. Larry, and then Teresa.
Yes, good morning. I will start off by saying, you know, with 30 years of Erace, this is one of the most bizarre articles and discussions that we have had. You know, fat phobia and racism. And there was even a section in there called the history of weight, stigma. You know, I've been a Black man for almost 77 years, from elementary school to high school to college. We've had people in the large size, but I've never heard or even been engaged in conversations of so-called fat phobia. I mean, even in elementary school, we just accepted people who were large as just people who were large. I guess like folk who are too skinny, sometimes we might rib them. Folk who might have too much weight on them, we might rib them and make fun of them as children. That's kind of normal for children. But this thing about fat phobia, as if there's a fear of fat people, I think the article itself kind of is kind of borderline racist, because it kind of put the stigma that obesity is a Black people problem, but it's an American problem. And so that's all I have to say on that for now. I'll be back.
Okay, Teresa, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. You know, I had always heard that BMI was not a good measurement for health. I never knew the origins of BMI, but I had to teach it as a biology teacher, just doing a like health and nutrition segment when I was an IB biology teacher. And both male and female students really liked, for different reasons, the you know, all the boys pretty much wanted to know what they should eat so they could lift weights and grow muscles, and all the girls, when calculating BMI. And I was in Honduras at the time when I taught this, so there were no Black students. Let's see, not in that particular class. I had one later on, but anyway, doing this, a lot of the girls, no matter what, how tall they were or how, you know, it seems like among the girls, they would never report that they were more than 135 pounds. And some of them were taller than me and visibly bigger than me. And I just thought, okay, I'm 137 myself. So I know you cannot be 135, but, you know, calculating their BMI. So I used myself as an example. And I was 137, and I just showed them how to calculate their BMI. And really, all of the girls were amazed that I weighed that much. And they said, it must be your muscles, miss. It must be. You don't look like you're fat. And it was just, you know, in that sense, it was good that I did my weight, because they thought 137 was, and I'm like, I'm 5'5", 137 for somebody who works out is pretty good, but they thought that that was a high number. And I thought it was really sad that they thought that was a high number. Just what you associate to with that. So I was also, and maybe if I come back later, because I think my 2 minutes are up, I want to find the guy who ranked originally the races. I found the guy, of course, he's a white guy, German, who came up with the 5 different races, but they were also ranked in hierarchy. So I'm going to get back on when I find that information.
Great, thank you, Louise. And then the list is open.
So I kind of agree with Larry to the point that obesity is everywhere, white and black, and it's one of our main problems, I think, in this country, health problems. But what was the point I was making? Oh, I found that article, a little confusing, as I don't know if, or they didn't explain it that well to me, I guess. I've after reading the article twice, I still wasn't sure what point they're making and how they're making it. And that totally could be my stupidity and lack of understanding. But I don't know if that's true. But then again, there's loads of things I don't know that are true. Kind of waffling just because I'm a little confused as to the exact points of what the article was aiming at. And I do agree that obesity and fat phobia exist, but I'm not sure how it links with racism. I think that was my question or point. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else like to get on the list? I guess I could jump in with a little something unless people are opposed. I think that the connection between racism and fat phobia, what it is meant to show that consistently Black folks or folks of color, especially women, are looked at as less than attractive because of being overweight. And that, this results in a carryover into like a doctor's office, where weight becomes the primary focus of discussion rather than other aspects of health. I mean, weight is only one measure, and it's certainly not the primary one. The article did point out that there are folks, there are studies that have been done where people who are obese are actually in greater overall health than some folks who are slim. So weight is not necessarily an indicator of health. And I think that's one of the points. But anyway, that's all for now. I don't want to take over since I'm facilitating. And okay, Larry, anybody else care to get on the list?
But while the article may have said 47% of US adults who fell into the overweight range for BMI are healthy, that leaves 53%, at least 53% who are not healthy. So again, I think this is another attempt. I mean, that term fat phobia, I mean, that's a word that was just created by somebody for some kind of an ulterior motive, fat phobia, a fear of fat people. Come on. Overweight people have been a part of our life, black and white. And I've never heard nobody express no fear of fat people. It just doesn't happen. We've learned to accept all types of people. Now it must be admitted that some overweight people are the result of lifestyles, eating habits, gluttony, bad food choices, and many other things. Of course, there are some that might be genetic, and some people who may be pre-exposed to become overweight. But we got to take this racist stigma out of this thing. It got nothing to do with racism. And I think it might be another attempt to try to
Teresa.
just cause us to accept it as something normal and not a healthy threat. That's all for now.
Teresa, and then the list is open. Marion?
Okay, so I put some things in the chat. I knew I had read about this before, and I always thought it was so self-serving. So the first guy who
I'm
supposedly
sorry.
identified races was German back in 1775, but the guy who I really wanted to talk about was Samuel George Morton. He was the one who collected all the skulls and allegedly said, oh, well, this is scientific proof that white people are superior and that the bottom rung are black people. And it's like no one at the time realized or even thought about, well, how wonderful self-serving that the person who is doing the rankings is of the category that he puts on top. That's what I want to bring out, because it reminded me when reading this article, the guy who's talking about the BMI, he did it to see the ideal human being, which, oh, surprise, surprise, is a white guy, which is the category that he belongs to. It's like these guys never find that they're on the bottom or that they're even second. They're always at the top, and they have scientific reasons as to why they're on the top. And so it's like no one would really or should really accept this if the researcher, him or herself, is always at the top of whatever ranking that they are. Like you just have no suspicion about that. It's just like, oh, surprise, surprise. A white guy is coming up with a scientific study and his category is on top. So I didn't even realize that that's how BMI, like I said, because as a teacher, you're not going to research every single thing that's on the syllabus that you have to teach, because it is a mathematical thing. It's like you calculate your height in centimeters, you did, and your weight, which you had to, I usually go by pounds, and you have to change into kilograms. And so you're just trying to figure out and make sure that the students knew the mathematical skills and how it's the ranking or whatever. And for the two people who I chose for underweight, I chose Twiggy, which those kids didn't know about that, quote unquote. I don't know if she was considered a supermodel back in the day, but certainly her role would have been supermodel in today's terms. And Amy Winehouse, these really emaciated looking women, which played a part. And a lot of the kids knew about Amy Winehouse when I taught this because she had recently passed.
All right, thank you. I think I messed up on the order of the list and I apologize. I think Amal is actually next. And then Louise, were you also?
Nope.
No, okay, so I just forgot to cross out your name. So it's actually Amal and then Marion, if that's okay, Marion. I apologize. I think I overlooked Amal. So Amal, go ahead, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, to your point, Maria, is how these ideas of body image and what's the ideal body, whose body is desirable, all of these ideas and concepts um, uh, um, spill over into this conversation, but they also spill over into areas where you can talk about media, sports, etc. One of the best examples I could give is about, I don't know if you remember, in the 1980s there was a group called the Weather Girls, and one of the Weather Girls was a woman named Marsha Warfield. And in the early 1990s, there was a group called the CNC Music Factory. They had a very popular song called "Everybody Dance Now."
Oh.
And so, but and the chorus of the song was sung by Marsha Warfield, who's a larger sized black woman. But when you look at the video, the person who's singing her part is not her. They found a model, a woman who's very slim. She was a black woman, but she was a very slim black woman. And she was singing the chorus for Marsha Warfield, who's actually a thicker sized black woman. And everybody knew it was Marsha Warfield because she had a very distinct voice. But nobody put together why she wasn't in the actual video of the song. And then later and nobody wanted to say it at the time. Let's put it like that. But everybody knew it was because Marsha Warfield was thicker. So the idea, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can finish your
No,
thought.
go ahead. I think I made the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Marion, and then the list is open after Marion.
All right, I'm going to ask, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because, and I cannot get FABC Spanish off my name. Every time I have the Spanish classes on Monday and Tuesday, and then when I try to get over here to Zoom erase, that the name won't disappear, even though the little box comes up and says rename. So I don't know what's wrong with this darn computer. It isn't me. I refuse to take the blame for that. Anyway, from the time I was about 16 until I was so into my 20s, because I had my first child when I was almost 28 years old. The boys in junior high and high school used to call me Skinny Minnie. And they also made fun of my lips. And that's the thing with some Black people. They're gonna find something to say in a negative way concerning your physical appearance. Well, when I started having children, I have three. I gained 10 to 15 pounds and never got it off. So I'm this little short, fat woman now. And I really don't worry about it. I did lose some weight, but it still hung on. I found it very disconcerting that the boys in my class, would call me Skinny Minnie. So we went to our class reunion, and then one of the guys said, "Oh, but Marion, you've gained some weight." And I told him, "Shut your fat mouth." I said, "You were the one that called me Skinny Minnie when we were in junior high school all through college, all through high school, rather." I said, "So now I've gained a lot of weight. And right now, at the age I am, I can't get it stuck." But what jumped out of this article at me is that this Adolf Catelet said it was never intended to be a measurement of obesity and good health, but it was intended to categorize people. So I know with the standard of beauty that's held in this country, Black women are considered attractive or beautiful. That doesn't bother me because the people that love me for who I am and not what I look like. So I don't give a hoot and a holler if you don't think I'm attractive. That's my 2 minutes. Oh
Would you
yeah,
like to
I've
get
got
back on the
enormous
list?
looking at
You
me.
could probably continue because
Let
I don't.
everybody go. I've ranted, gotten my rant out for now.
Okay. All right. Louise is next, and after that, the list is open.
Well, firstly, Marion, I think you're beautiful and wonderful.
Thank you.
And Amal, that CC Music Factory, great song, by the way. I love that song. But you're right, they didn't show the singer, which was a long time ago, right? And I do believe things have changed about embracing overweight or bigger bodies. Absolutely, like on the front of magazines and stuff, they're not all like twiggy anymore. During the 60s, they embraced skeletal kind of females, but now there's the bigger voluptuous bodies that are embraced, which I really do believe that is a thing now, which is really great. like Lizzo. I mean, she is like a symbol of beauty and what, you know, she's amazing. Although apparently she's not very nice to her co-workers. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's it. That was all I had to say. That our views have changed a little bit on weight.
Thank you. Okay, Amal, you're next, and the list is open after that.
You put me on.
Okay, Glenn after Amal.
Yeah. So yeah. So like I said, with the CNC Music Factory. So that was one example of the this idea of larger people not being sexy or beautiful or desirable, if you will. And then same scenario, it was another song. I don't know if a lot of people remember, but Raven Simone, when she was a kid, she had put out a CD where she was singing. And there was a up and coming young lady. She's very famous now, but at the time, not many people knew who she was. This is 1994-ish, in that arena, somewhere there. But this woman was Missy Elliott. Missy Elliott is a very popular rapper. And like I say, she's very well known now, but in 1994, nobody knew who Missy Elliott was. And Missy Elliott, like Marsha Warfield, sung a chorus on one of Raven Simone's songs. She rapped, rather. And once again, when you see the video, she's not in the video doing her own rap. Someone else is. Why? Because Missy Elliott is a larger. She's lost a lot of weight since the time. But when she first came on the scene, particularly in 1994, she was a larger size Black woman. And then we have to look at it from the perspective of imagery, because a lot of times when you look at the image of the Black woman in media, her image is not portrayed very well. So that ties into these ideas and concepts of beauty. So, and the list goes on and on with these things. You know, even when you look at the BMI, you know who would be considered overweight based on the BMI? Serena Williams. Serena Williams will be considered overweight based on what that BMI, based on the idea of what the BMI said she should look like. Serena Williams would be overweight. You know who else would be overweight? In his prime, former heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson.
Thank you, Amal. We have Glenn next, and then Teresa.
Well, America is the most overweight country in the world. We got supermarkets. We ain't got regular markets. We got abundance of food like nobody else got. You know, our waste matter could feed the starving people of the world. The garbage man has so much problem trying to pack all the food we throw in the garbage can. You know, and we have become people who do not exercise. Children are regularly obese because instead of when I was a child, everybody was outside. Everybody played games. It was always activity, so you didn't have no chance to gain no weight because you were burning so much. But everything now is calorie driven. Without somebody got a phone on or something, because I keep hearing all this feedback. But anyway, when I was a child, we had like 8 ounces cold drink 8 ounces. Now everything is gigantic. You know, so yeah, you're going to put on the pounds because of because we are a high calorie country. That's my point.
Right. Thank you, Glenn. Next is Teresa and then Louise.
Okay, going off what Amal had said about back in hip hop or rap days, I used to be an avid capoeira, that's Brazilian martial arts, and one of my other female capoeiras once said, "Oh, you're gonna come to whatever higher level class." Like really more strenuous than the actual class, the normal class that I took. And my joke to her, and I still remember this, and I said, "No, I'm not going to that. I'm not trying to be in a rap video." Because every black woman you saw in a rap video, she was buff, like almost you need to eat some more food or something. And that was my joke because that's all you really saw until Queen Latifah and Missy Elliott. Like they did more not just for music, but also image. Like, let's see some talented women who are not skinny minis or look like they spend 16 hours in the gym every day. And I still remember making that joke because that was my standard. So I'm not going to work out that hard. I'm not trying to be in a rap video. And then if you are the buff, bigger size woman like Serena Williams, for example, all these accusations about being a man.
Mm.
And that poor woman who they really wanted to DNA test her. It's just like, screw you. Not every woman has the same body type, just like we don't all have the same temperament. We don't all want the same thing. Um, and also highly regulated, even though this article isn't about that, kind of going along with how you look. Even women, and I'm so happy no one ever approached me about it, was wearing our hair naturally. That's a natural part as my body type, my size. I'm still blessed to have my mother. I knew that as I got older, my body was going to look like her body. And, it is transforming there. I mean, there's just certain things that, even though, we live in the United States, you can't run away from your genetics. And I exercise still on a regular basis. But the last point, oh, well, I guess I won't make the last point.
I can put you
Unless
back
the list
on.
is the list open or
And after Louise, it's open. Would you like to get back
okay,
on?
yeah. Well, I'd like to just make this last point.
Yeah.
For a hot second, Larry Wilmore had a show,
And Marion?
and one thing he said is about when it was fashionable to be skinny, all the rich people were skinny. When it was fashionable to be fat, all the rich people were fat. He said, what's fashionable in body type is whatever the poor cannot easily accomplish. That was my last point.
Thank you. I'll also say, well, you can't run away from genetics. You also cannot run away from menopause. Okay.
Amen.
Louise is next, and then we have Marion and
Um,
Larry.
okay, two things. One that Glenn made me think of is when I first came to the States, getting a sandwich, it would be like bread, and then there'd be like that much meat or whatever it is, and then another little dinky slice of bread. And I could make like 5 sandwiches out of that one. It's just excessive. There's always like an excess decadence about America, that blew my mind when I first moved here. Um, and yes, they size the sizes of drinks and fries or whatever you get. This just the huge portions of things. Um, and then the second thing is actually literally happened on Friday. I had to have a little talk to a guy who had called another student chunky. And she is mixed race. And so I had to have a word. Luckily, she didn't hear it, but other students around heard it. So I had the conversation with him about that, but it's just kind of coincidental that that just happened actually on Friday. Um, anyway, that's that. Thanks.
Thank you. Marion, and then we have Larry.
Okay, when Teresa mentioned oh oh goodness, the person who was considered to be overweight, I thought about Michelle Obama lately. Now, the people have been out of the White House for a few years, and you know that Michelle Obama was really adamant and really dedicated to health, good health, and exercising. And yet they say the ugly thing about you all heard those ugly comments about her being a man. As it, it's so ridiculous. I know I digress, but when Teresa mentioned the Serena Williams Queen Latifah, I thought about that. I just think that it's just so ridiculous. Uh, the article said something about it isn't color so much that triggers the racism among people who are of color, but their physical beauty. I've already mentioned that. But what I found most appalling is one of the most appalling things that I read, that doctors are some of the most common perpetrators of fat phobia. That takes me back to what Larry said about he never heard the word before, and I never had either. So instead of giving the people medical information as it is said in the article, uh, they provide less medical information and often have biased, uh, stigmatizing views of fat people, and that's a doctor. And I think that is just so appalling. And they think the patients, if they give them some information about how to lose weight, they believe that the so-called fat people are non-compliant or undisciplined. And I said, now, if you can't go to a doctor and get some information about maybe controlling your appetite, and it's something that's triggering it, it's mental anguish, I think, that does this. But if you can't go to a doctor and get some helpful information, who can you go to? And it's a double whammy with your skin color, and there's a triple whammy with your skin size. So you can't win for losing. But I did want to mention that Michelle Obama, trim and firm and healthy and stressing exercise, going outside, and yet they had this ugly, nasty comment to make about her. I'm telling you, we human beings are some stupid creatures.
All right, thank you, Marion. Next we have Larry, then Amal, and then Teresa.
You know, again, I say that the conversation of weight is normal. You know, whether you lack bigness or don't lack bigness, you're comfortable with big, that conversation is normal. We have more diet pills and diet exercises and surgeries and stuff. That's a part of our normal conversation today. But to turn it into a race thing, I think that in itself is racist. And I go to the definition in the article where it talks about fat phobia's racist origin. It says, according to Sabrina Strings, author of Fearing Black Body, who fears black body? You know, the racial origins of fat phobia has its roots in the transatlantic slave trade. Come on, I read a whole lot of stuff over my life, and I'm a pretty intelligent guy, but I ain't never heard nothing like that before. And its roots in transatlantic slave trade, in which the colonists asserted that black people were prone to glut. Why the colonists instead of the enslavers? You know, so we got this thing fixed up to turn it into a race thing. So the colonists, I say the enslavers, asserted that black people were prone to gluttony and sexual excess. Come on, it wasn't prone to gluttony and sexual excess when the colonists were raping black women, you know. And it says, and that their love of food caused them to be fat. European colonists, the enslavers, claimed a moral superiority. Can you imagine that? Enslavers claiming a moral superiority on anything? Come on, you know, valuing moderation and self-control. They didn't value moderation and self-control when they were enslaving human beings, raping women and children, you know. and which made them thin and according to them of the superior race. So if that's what made them the superior race, I would never want to be like them. Thank you.
Thank you. Amal and then Teresa.
Yeah. I think rather than use terms like fat phobia and these you know, you could create a word these days the way things go. It's just amazing. I try to use words more like body image and the images of how people bodies are presented, rather in media, whether that be magazines and television, so on and so forth. And the reason I used terms like body image is because and I'm tying this into the historical the racist history of this idea of fat phobia. There was a woman, I believe she was from South Africa, that the European enslavers had came and got, and they brought her to Europe, and they treated her like she was basically a circus act. Her name was Sarah Bartman. I highly recommend everyone look her up. And if you look at Sarah Bartman, in terms of, once again, going back to body image, she's not built like the European woman. Under no circumstances she built like the European woman. And so using her body as a means of like a circus act, they toured her around Europe like she was an animal, basically. And they had her in a cage, and they had her making these like roaring sounds like she was an ape or some type of animal or something. And so that's part of the historical racism of, once again, I don't use fat phobia, I'll say body image. Because, and then when you go into slavery, women who had larger bodies were considered breedable, if you will, because they would use those type of women to breed, to make more children, because their bodies were larger. And once again, this is the racism of it. I'm not saying, I'm not debating the facts or the truths and the falseness of it, or whether you think it's true or false. I'm not. That's not what I'm debating. I'm looking at the racism of it. And so the women who had larger bodies, larger breasts, larger hips, seen as better for breathing and making children. So there is some history in this when you're dealing with the body and its image, and tying it into racism, and particularly Black bodies. But look up Sarah Bartman and look at her body. Her body image is going to show up, and it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Amal. Teresa, and then the list is open.
Okay, thank you. I put the definition of fat phobia. I mean, it seems like there's been a interpretation literally that phobia means fear, but the phenomenon itself is also talking about aversion and discrimination, which is more of what I think this article is used for, is using that term for. And I do agree that you just can't overlook how many centuries Black bodies were viewed. I mean, it's basically taking the slaves' bodies, turning it into a machine and working it to death to get the most productivity out of it. And yes, slavery is now over. Okay. But that attitude is very, very hard to stop when you think of the critical. I wish I would have read more, but then my schooling, didn't want to give me the full history of. I never really understood that there would be this superior attitude, because I grew up thinking racism was dying out, and that's really old people, and not realizing that those older people would teach the younger generations to hate and to think like they think, and maybe with some minor differences or whatnot, but not realizing that somebody would look at me and think that I need fixing, basically, or that my ideas were inferior because it came from me. I mean, that is just like. So when you talk about fat phobia, you think if somebody can judge you just because of the color of your skin or how you wear your hair, Or, you know, my favorite, oh, did you ever wear your hair normal? And I always say, you mean chemically treated? As if that is normal. And they freeze up. It's like, I'm ready for you. I've had dreadlocks for 30 years. Bring it. But when it's first, you know, when you first get those, oh, well, this ruins your hair and this do that. To me, the fat phobia is just another facet of that. Looking at your body and saying, this needs to be fixed.
All right, thank you. The list is open. Louise.
My only rebuttal to that is
Mary.
it's not the race, you know. What was your last point, Teresa? Oh my God, what did you just say? The body.
I talk so much. I know.
No, but that last point, it was, you can be judged.
About being fixing, needing to be fixed. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not for me. That's for white or black. You know, it's not. That's not part of the racial thing. I don't think. You know, people are always judging people's bodies, but that was it. Just a very simple point. Sorry.
Thank you, Larry, and then Amal.
You know, I think one of the problems is when we accept that word fat phobia as a part of our vernacular, you know, and I mean, it seems to me that racism created this term fat phobia and tried to put it off on black people, you know. There was an article just on the 17th, I think it was, of this month that I haven't, that I have in front of me, where it was talking about obesity rates in Louisiana and how high they were. You know, about 40% of Louisiana adults are obese, according to the article. It don't say nothing about black adults, white adults. It says adults. So when we make this thing out of a race thing and make it appear that there's some kind of fat phobia, which is a fear of fat people. Any kind of way we fix it up. Some people, some men that desire women with some meat on them. You know, somebody mentioned Twiggy. There was a generation where everybody tried to be a Twiggy, and now there's a generation where some other things are accepted as normal. But I think as long as we could try to get our people to accept as normal things that are destructive to the human race, some things may be normal, but they may not be natural. And if they're not natural, means they're unnatural. Unnatural are those things that is a threat to humanity. So that if everybody did it, humanity would not last long. And so I think to have a healthy conversation about being too skinny, about being too fat, whatever, it's on the table. But to throw a race issue in there, I think that smacks at racism. So.
Amal.
Yeah. To something that Reverend Larry was saying, I don't believe that. And once again, I'm not a fan of the term fat phobia. But I'm only using it for the sake of this article. I don't think that the word was being exclusive to Black people. I think it was using it in the context of the history of racism and how it relates to Black people. And there's a difference. And so if you look at the image, and once again, I always go back to imagery, and our imagery in media and in print, whether that be magazine or so on and so forth, there's always been this image of the Black woman. You know, even if you go back to the early, you know, the Hattie McDaniels and the early mammy, the days when we were allowed to be in movies and we were the mammies and the maids. Or if you look at that Black woman image wise, she was always this very big Black woman, and she fit a description, if you will. And so even I always use the example of the Wiz. I don't if you look at the Wiz, the black version of the Wizard of Oz. If you look at the movie The Wiz, the good witch was Lena Horne. Now we all know what Lena Horne looks like. And if you look at the bad witch, her sister was the complete image-wise opposite. There's this very big, dark-skinned, big-nosed, thick black woman who fit a complete opposite description. And once again, I think a lot of times we don't, Melvin Keane, that's exactly what her name is. And I apologize for not remembering her name, but she, as a matter of fact, she played the mother on What's Happening. For people who may remember that show from the 1970s. And so once again, if you look at her image-wise, that image is what perpetuates into people's mentality. And so it wasn't about making that term fat phobia exclusive to black people. It was only showing how that term relates to black people in terms of the history of our experience with racism in this country.
All right. You can put me on the list.
Okay. We have Louise and then we have Glenn.
Amal just made my point for me about the fat phobia usage in this article, and that Teresa put in a definition of phobias, which, a lot of it is fear, but then there's also an aversion, which aversion just means, a dislike of. So there are many fat phobic people, and that word's been around for a very long time. And there's a lot of people who do have that, and it's not a fear. It's like a fat person. It's not that, It's an aversion or a dislike of, Larry. So it wasn't made for this article. It's been going. So it's not really a racist thing at all. It's a overweight fat thing. Yeah. All right, that was it.
Thank you. Glenn.
They have people in the world that will try to create things, put things out there and see what'll stick to the wall.
There.
And this is one of them. They always people who are going to create things and create how should I say this? Create the well, I'll just say disturbances in the society, and they make it catch on. And if we leave from here believing it exists, then it's working. So I'm like Larry. It's nothing. It's nothing in. It's no racism involved here, and it's just somebody trying to create something that don't exist. That's it.
Thank you, Glenn. Larry?
Well, in context of the article is entitled Fat Phobia and Racism. And so that is the extent that I'm speaking on from the standpoint of the article that was brought for discussion, fat phobia and racism. So the two are linked together. And then doing somebody said earlier that you could almost create definitions nowadays, and make it sound like whatever you want it to sound like. But just in doing a quick check of the dictionary for the word phobia, it says an exaggerated, usually inexplicable and illogical fear of a particular object, class, or object, or situation. So it is a fear. That's what phobia means. It means fear. And we could try to stretch it and bring any kind of other philosophy in there. But the article is entitled Fat Phobia, which means a fear of fat people. That's no other way to look at it. Now, if it were another article talking about it, maybe we could use that other article. But for purposes of this article, it says fat phobia and racism. That's what the article is talking about, and that's what the conversation was that was on the table this morning. racism and fatness. Just that simple. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Marion.
I'd like to share another story with you all. That's the beauty of living so long. You can go back and find true incidents from the past. This involved my mother. She came to New Orleans when she was 22 years old. My maternal grandmother had a hissy fit that she was going to this horrible place to live, New Orleans, I'm speaking of. And she worked in the homes of very wealthy people, and eventually she became a caterer, self-employed person. She worked in the home of a French representative from this country who would go to France and, you know, help to promote civic ideas and whatnot, have to entice people to come to New Orleans. So this particular night, she was working at the French diplomat's house. I guess he's long gone by now. And it was a group of people from France. So my mother brought some food into the area where the people were having the party. And this woman from France very loudly claimed, "Oh, look how huge she is." This is my mother. And my mother said it was all she could do to keep from hurling that tray across the room at that French woman. But I thought that was, and I was in high school at the time, but I remember this. Here I am. I've been here since the age of the dinosaurs, and I can remember my mother coming home. I think it was in the 1970s too, telling us that this rude woman actually made this disparaging remark in the presence of the other guests. I just thought that was just so horrible and uh, just so rude, so inconsiderate, showing no respect for my mother to think that you're demonizing her and disrespecting her in a room of people that my mother didn't even know. She's working as an employee, and then you're a guest in these people's homes, and you're going to make this loud comment about another human being. I thought it was just despicable. But and here I am bringing it up more than 50, 60 years later, but I couldn't help that, but help but remember, since we've been talking about this, how this French woman disrespected and insulted my mother.
All right, thank you, Marion. And next we have Louise, and then I think after that we can start with the wrap-ups. Louise?
So Marion, I think they're all that is to say about that was she was French. I'll leave it there. And I have mentioned this, I think, to Erace meetings before, but when I was in New Orleans, I'd been there maybe, a few years only, and I worked with the youth of New Orleans. We would take them on canoe trips and blah, blah, outdoor educator, which is the best job ever, by the way. But anyway, I was chit-chatting at a time when we were just resting and hanging out and talking to this young girl, and they were all talking about, who they liked, who they didn't like. And I was like, "Hey, what about so-and-so? He seems like a nice guy." And she was like, "Oh no, he's too black. He's too dark," which blew my mind. By the way, she's black. It blew my mind, and started my journey of racism in the South and racism in this country, and how it affects people even down to that. So yeah.
I got a question.
Yep.
Fine question.
Right. When you said that she was French, wasn't that a racist statement?
Yeah, absolutely. The English hate the French. So yeah, it was a completely racist statement against
Prejudice.
the French.
Yeah.
Yes. I own that. It was it was kind of a joke, but not really, because yeah, the French suck. Sorry.
All right, thank you, everybody.
I'm from Louisiana. I'm part French. That was some racism toward me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were offended, sir. I'm very sorry.
Okay, moving on to the 1 minute wrap ups. Everybody gets 1 minute, I think, because everybody spoke who wanted to. Amal, 1 minute, the wrap up.
Sure, great article. Like I said, it's just a matter of the language of it. Like I said, I'm not a fan of the term fat phobia, but I understand the context in which it was being used in this particular article and the history of how body image and how people look um, um, could tie into racism in this country. And once again, I always use the image, the example of Serena Williams and Sarah Bartman, and that list can go on and on. Like I said, with even with the BMIs, Serena Williams would be considered overweight. Mike Tyson. Even I found this out later, and like even Marilyn Monroe would be considered overweight based on BMIs. So we cannot ignore how when the scientific community at that time was coming up with these ideas of what's desirable and what's not, that they did not tie racism into that. What they were doing is they were comparing European bodies to the bodies of non-European peoples. And in doing so, they came up with these ideas and concepts of what was beauty, what was the ideal body image. That's what Hitler was doing in Nazi Germany, breathing out certain undesirables and to create what he was considering the master race. So if we're not going to think that body image and how a person how that body person looks doesn't tie into racism, then I have to question what history of racism people has been studying. Like I said, I'm not a fan of the term fat phobia, but I do understand how bodies and racism relate historically.
Thank you, Amal. Marianne, you have 1 minute.
This was very interesting and stimulating. Thanks, Marla. I just scanned my notes, and fact number 11 said BMT, that body mass index, was created to measure the ideal white man in the 19th century. So 19th century, and here we are in the 21st century. So more than 200 years ago, this body mass was created to measure the ideal white man. So to me, this does smack of racism, even though I'd never heard of fat phobia before. I thought this was so interesting that you did bring this article, and I appreciated everybody's comments. But we humans really have to get our act together. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I really think dogs, cats, alligators, kangaroos, bears, giraffes, they're so much smarter than we are. I believe that.
Thank you. Teresa.
Thanks for the article. This is just another facet of, I think, an important discussion. And I find it humorous how anyone can have an over-reliance on any scientific or even mathematical or algorithmic thing and not think that racism is baked in the cake. If the person themselves are racist, then the way they see things and the way they create things, the way they do a study, and even and I'll tell you this, if you put like person skiing and then you put black person skiing, see what the difference in the article or the images that you get in Google. I mean, it is just, or the famous one is three students, and you'll see three students, they'll mostly be white, and then you put three black students and you'll see criminals. I mean, the racism is baked into the cake because the people are. It doesn't matter that you're using numbers, i.e. algorithms, or it's a scientific study. It's baked into the cake because the attitude of the researcher or the mathematician or the computer programmer. So I don't have any problem with fat phobia. We can just call it umbrella body image, but thank you for this article.
Thank you. All right, Glenn, you have a minute.
Well, I really ain't got too much to say, except y'all should vote Louise out because she committed racism in this form. All right.
Thank you. Larry, you have a minute?
Okay. We have to be careful. I think Teresa kind of touched upon it, but we have to be careful how we choose to use words that were created by other people to work against us. And sometimes, unfortunately, my people are good for doing that. If white people created something, we sometimes have a tendency to jump on the bandwagon. Not all of us. I know that, but some of us do. And again, 3 years, 3 months from being 77 through elementary, high school, senior high school, college, the church, organizations, etc. I've never heard the term fat phobia used, nor have I ever experienced a fear of people who were not of a certain size. We may have teased people and all of that kind of stuff that goes normal with childhood, but a fear of fat, no, that's something that's created for somebody's ulterior motive. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise?
By the way, Glenn, the French hate the English too, so it goes both ways, believe me. And it is kind of tongue in cheek, but it is kind of something. Anyway, it's kind of like the Saints and the Cowboys football team, or Atlanta,
Falcons, yeah, Falcons.
Right, the Falcons, yeah. Yeah, I was actually curious as to how this discussion would go, Marla, and it was really good, and it brought out a lot of interesting things. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping time.
No problemo.
I just have a few final thoughts. I was kind of furiously trying to scratch down notes, and of course they're completely illegible and disorganized. But one thing that I wanted to say is that the term itself, I feel like it wasn't just created, it was just, it exists to name something that's always been there. And I will point out specifically, it's more about bias and stigma. And I would say the ongoing desire, first and foremost, of white women to pursue thinness constantly. And I can just say in my personal experience as a white woman, it is the worst being around other white women who are constantly demonizing food, attaching morality to certain foods and pursuing thinness at all costs. I mean, I'm not sure, maybe it's a little harder, not harder, but maybe it's just not as experienced by men to see that. But I think fat phobia exists in all of us, whether we call it that or not. And a man on here actually made a comment, and I don't even remember which man it was, but the comment was, some men really like fat or bigger women. And that comment in and of itself is a fat phobic comment, because you're suggesting that that's the exception, that some men like fatter women or bigger women, but that the desirable woman is a woman who is thinner. So I just wanted to point that out. I think the important thing is that folks teach their kids just not to make comments about bodies, that your body is really the least interesting thing about you when it comes to our existence as human beings. And I know a lot of folks would argue that that's not the case, but in truth, it really is. And I think that's everything. I guess we can stop the recording. And thanks everybody for